3 people have died in a tavern at Hofmeyr in the Eastern Cape on Saturday. Police investigations are still underway. Now, ActionSA says it will be making a petition to tackle underage drinking following the tavern deaths in Hofmeyr and Enyobeni. Let's unpack this now with Athol Trollip, chairperson of the Eastern Cape ActionSA. Very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. Welcome to Newzroom Afrika. One would have thought that the tragic Enyobeni tavern disaster would have been the last incident of such nature to occur, or perhaps a deterrent to minors. But clearly this has not been the case. Another very distressing tragedy.
Good evening, Mpo, and good evening to your listeners. What's of great concern for ActionSA is the fact that we've had 2 terrible and very tragic incidents in the Eastern Cape where young people have succumbed in adult entertainment establishments where alcohol is sold. The Enyobeni tavern incident still has not given any clarity on how 21 young people were killed. And the greatest concern for us is that young people can get access to alcohol almost anywhere in society. It seems that the Liquor License Act is not properly applied, and people sell alcohol to anyone, especially underage people, almost anywhere in society. And this is a problem because young people aren't able to cope with the consequences of consuming alcohol, and we've seen a really tragic increase of teenage pregnancies in this province. And the Eastern Cape has been a socially depressed area for many, many years. And this goes hand in hand with substance abuse. And of great concern for us is that parents and guardians and people responsible for young people don't seem to have any care or knowledge of where the children are after dark, or certainly, after midnight. And that's a grave concern. And we believe much more should be done about controlling access to adult entertainment establishments and also access to alcohol.
Well, we'll talk about the petition in just a moment, but what do you think it will take to get the message across to the owners of similar establishments not to sell alcohol to minors or even allow them access?
Well, first of all, I think, parental responsibility is probably the most important aspect of this situation. Parents should know where their children are after dark, and children should be under parental supervision at all times, especially, minor children. So that's the first responsibility of families and parents, is to make sure you know where your children are and that children aren't able to access alcohol and substances that diminish their, well-being.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. The second thing is that there are very strict regulations about which establishments can sell alcohol and under which conditions the sale of alcohol can take place. And to me, it's very clear that there is no control of that. One can go into any single town, whether it's Hofmeyr, where the latest tragedy took place in a tavern called Razzmatazz, or East London or Buffalo City, where Enyobeni incident took place. You can access alcohol in almost any kind of establishment at any age with no regulation and no control. And to me, that's a great tragedy because, regulations are there and legislation is there to prevent people like young teenagers or underage minors who can't make, proper decisions for themselves. The regulations are there to prevent them getting access to alcohol and other substances. And it's very clear to me that the control of the sale of alcohol and other substances is not being maintained, and that there's no proper policing thereof. And to me, that's a real travesty. I mean, there are laws, for example, that prohibit the sale of alcohol in establishments close to schools and churches. And that's the fundamental regulation. But you can go and have a look in any township and in any town in the city. Institutions are selling alcohol to children close to churches, close to schools. So I just think that's very deficient.
How do you then think that law enforcement officials should be stepping up in tackling underage drinking? Because, it's a serious social and public health problem in South Africa.
Well, as I said, there should be parental responsibility, first of all. So parents of children who know that there are institutions that sell alcohol close to the proximity of schools and churches and places of worship should not allow that. And they should petition the authorities that allow that to take place not to allow it anymore. That's the first thing. So you must take responsibility for your own livelihood and for your own children. But also that the government and all the institutions and departmental institutions of government should make sure that where alcohol is sold on-site for on-site consumption, that there are no young people there. I remember, for example, not long ago, and I mean, you can see with my hairstyle, and you can see that I'm not a young person anymore.
Yeah.
I remember in the United States, less than 10 years ago, that I went to an establishment while I was there on a study exercise, and I was asked for my identification before they served me any thing to drink. Now, that never happens in South Africa, and it's very clear that I'm not under the age of 18. Even 10 years ago, it would have been very obvious, but they were wanting my identification. So I think what should happen in South Africa is that if you do have a license to sell alcohol, that the adherence to the regulations should be strictly enforced, and certainly no alcohol should be sold to anyone underage, and that every single person should have to show identification, especially if they are apparently young, before they're allowed into an institution, let alone given access to the sale of alcohol. So I think that there needs a lot more to be done about providing evidence that you are of age to be able to consume alcohol, because, minors can't really handle the consequences of consuming alcohol. And we've seen this time and time again, especially in poor provinces like the Eastern Cape, where poor people who don't have any opportunities are succumbing and losing their lives because of imbibing in alcohol, or even worse, in the Nyobeni and the Razzmatazz incident. We're not really sure how those people lost their lives, whether it was a stampede, whether an unknown substance was discharged in a tavern and people ingested that substance. We really don't know, and that's one of the things that we've been petitioning in the Eastern Cape, is that to get to the bottom of the facts of what happened at Nyobeni. But the real thing is, we should not allow our children to be out at night unaccompanied as parents and families. And secondly, no institution should be allowed to sell alcohol to underage people.
So with the plan on petitioning against underage drinking, how are you planning on doing this in terms of the logistics? How are you going to get people to participate?
Well, first of all, we'll start with an online petition to get parents and family members of young people who might have succumbed or been involved in underage drinking and who've suffered the consequences thereof. We'll start an online petition. But also we're going to petition the Premier and all the public representatives in the Eastern Cape to stand up and make sure that they take responsibility to ensure that our children are protected from the consumption of alcohol and the consequences that follow. As I said earlier, that we've seen there's been a great spike in the teenage pregnancies in this province, and that's a social problem. It's a social problem that goes hand in hand with poverty and the desperation of families that have, very little and no prospect of a better future. So people start losing themselves in alcohol, and the consequences of that is that you have social depravity and also social consequences of like underage pregnancy. And, the responsibility of bringing a child into this world should not be the responsibility of somebody who is underage. And that's the reality in the Eastern Cape, is that we've got children giving birth to children. And that is a direct consequence of being allowed access to consumption of alcohol, especially in public places.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Thanks for weighing in on this discussion. Eastern Cape ActionSA chairperson Athol Trollip.